They had me sign an exclusivity contract.
Mm,
They were really good at not telling me what it was. And this is on me. I mean, I should have read it.
sure.
But so I don't blame them at all, except for that it did put a bad taste in my mouth
Sure.
later.
This is Spilling the Realty, a podcast by Sold in a Snap.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Spilling the Real Tea. I'm your host, Eric Johnson, and today we're going to be talking about building trust, what clients really want in a realtor. Today with me, I have Kristen Piedra. Welcome on the show, Kristen.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to kind of dig into your experience with, buying, selling, all the things that go into it, and just kind of hear your perspective on all this. But before we get into that, I do want to thank today's sponsor, which is Sold in a Snap. Sold in a Snap is Central Texas' premier real estate photography and marketing company, helping agents look incredible, stand out from the competition, and grow their business. We provide photos, tours, video, and marketing, everything that you need to market yourself and your listings with ease. Want to save time while your clients and dominate the market? Visit soldinasnap.com and see how Sold in Snap can elevate your business or your listing today. So Kristen's actually with us today. She is not a realtor. She's not a photographer, a broker. She's a client, and we're excited to have her insight on what it looks like to buy, but also sell, using multiple realtors in kind of those different spaces. So we're excited to get the perspective from the other side. Well, Kristen, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what brought you into Central Texas.
Okay, yeah. So I'm originally from Boise, Idaho area. Spent most of my childhood growing up there. After that, I lived in Utah and Washington for a little bit. And then in 2020, my husband and I moved to Texas. So that was like a big change. He had a job opportunity there. So we've been here for 5-6 years, which is crazy. I always have to think about it because I'll say the number wrong. I'm like, oh, it's 2026. It's been 6 years now. Yeah. So we've been in Waco, and we've had opportunities to buy and sell houses here. Been here for years.
And before that, now you had just you and your husband been renting homes and, living in different places, and you have kind of a decent foundation of what you might have been looking for coming into Waco. Is that right?
Yeah. So growing up, my dad was in the home business for a while. He built custom homes until 2008. We all know what happened in 2008.
Yep.
And he actually had a development underway at that time. But so I grew up with a dad who was very particular about houses, and he always built new, and he kind of instilled in us like what to expect from a house, I think. But then after my husband and I got married, we rented, students and all that.
Yeah.
But so when we came here and he had finished school, that was the first time we bought. So our first house we ever bought was in Waco, and we bought 2 here now.
So you moved to Waco, you bought your first home. I bet you that was like a different experience, right? So you're probably used to like trees and like a whole different climate, a whole different kind of world out in the West Coast. Tell me about some of the differences that you saw coming from kind of your childhood, kind of early adulthood into Central Texas.
It was a hard thing to kind of wrap my mind around. I think one of the biggest differences is in Idaho. I mean, at least where we were living, mostly new houses.
Sure.
And you're coming here and it's a lot of older homes. And so, unless you want to do a full renovation, you kind of have to be okay with the layout. You have to be okay with certain things. And the aesthetic is very different.
Sure.
I don't really know the words to describe it, but it felt just like in Idaho, things were maybe a little farther ahead as far as like trend and things like that. And it could be just because I was used to seeing a lot of custom homes with upscale upgrades and everything. But I came here and I looked through a lot of houses and I was having a hard time finding one I liked.
Yeah.
And that was a struggle a little bit. Also, I miss basements. Okay.
Yes.
There was actually a moment where we were looking really hard at older homes because a few of them had basements. Of course, they're not basements you'd want to hang out in, but it was like almost a nostalgia thing for me. So I miss basements, and a lot of the neighborhoods in Idaho that I was growing up in, they were newer neighborhoods, so they didn't have trees. They didn't have a lot of that landscaping developed. So that's another thing I see that's desirable here is you have, established neighborhoods with trees that have been there a long time. You have established landscaping. Obviously, you have the newer neighborhoods here too, but I think that there's a lot of a lot more older homes and older developments that people are going in and shopping as far as that versus like maybe building new.
Because of the land and the trees
The
and stuff
land
like that.
and where you want to be and everything else. Whereas in Idaho, I mean, it's like you're spreading out, so you're getting new, and it's just kind of spreading farther and farther out. But yeah, I just think that, there's a certain style here that you don't find in the West.
Yeah.
I don't know what I call it, the Texas style house, where it's you go in and you know the layout. You're like, your dining room's here and your kitchen's here. And a lot of them are 3-bedroom, and I struggled finding maybe like a 4 or 5-bedroom house.
Yeah.
Whereas in the West, I felt like that wasn't a hard thing to get.
Sure.
So there's a certain layout and style here that I had to say, okay, I just have to know that this is most of what's out there. And it's not going to be the aesthetic that I'm used to.
Yeah.
And
not necessarily a bad thing, just different.
It's just different.
Yeah.
And when you grow up thinking that houses all look one way and you come here and you're like, I don't like any of these, but it's just that's not what I'm used to or what I was looking for necessarily.
Yeah. So when you first came here, were you kind of looking on your own? Had you thought about looking for a realtor early on, or tell me about your process of finding that first home?
So finding the first home was definitely I was on it because my husband had just finished school and I said, we're buying a house. I am not renting again. We actually tried to buy a home in San Antonio. We were there for just a few months and didn't end up liking that job. So thank goodness we never found anything that worked. And I think that there was a reason why we never found anything that worked because we didn't end up staying there. But when we came to Waco, I was like, I want a house. Like, I want something that I can paint the walls. I can do what I can change the home how I want because obviously when you're a renter, you can't do that. And so what I did was we had one weekend to look and I just found a realtor under a name that I thought, seemed trustworthy. I was like, I know this name. I know the company. I'm going to whoever picked up the phone was who I went with. I just went with the lady that picked up the phone. And I said, I have one weekend to look. So my buying experiences, my 2 different houses were very different because this was more of I have a certain budget, and so I know my options aren't going to be as, it's not going to be as wide of a net. And she gave me a list of homes, and and we can get into this later if we think it's more applicable, but I prefer Zillow. I know Zillow is like a little bit farther behind some of the MLS systems that the realtors send me, but it tailors itself better to me and what I want. Mm-hmm. And so they would send me MLS listings and I'd look at them and I say, I don't like any of these. I actually hate all of them. And so I'm going to get on Zillow because I have these lists of homes and I realize it's a step behind, but that's usually the tool I end up using. And then I tell them
it works for you.
It works for me. And I tell them what houses I want to go look out off of there.
Yeah. So you're working with this realtor. You're coming up with your own list of stuff.
Yeah.
How many houses did you come up with in that weekend to look?
It was probably like 7 or 8. It was a full day. I think we just took one Saturday. And I'm not afraid to admit, like, I'm very picky. I'm probably not someone a realtor likes to work with. I have like a certain aesthetic I like, and I'm very picky about what I want, and I want it to be right. It's the biggest purchase you're going to make, and I want it to be the right one. So we probably looked at 7 or 8 houses that day, and again, my 2 house searches were very different. The budget mattered more at that point, and so there were a few we looked at that we really liked that had like a view of the lake, but they just needed a lot more work. And my husband and I are not those DIYers. Like as much as I would like to be, I'm like, I have all the ideas, but I always have to hire someone to do them for me. So I said, we don't have the budget to, make these
tear
what
this
I would
wall
like.
down or redo this kitchen or
and update everything. So we ended up going with a house that was like at the bottom of our budget, but it had like a slightly updated kitchen, and I liked the way the kitchen looked. It had the right amount of bedrooms. It had a big backyard. I had 2 kids at the time. So it checked all the boxes, and I just was like, you know what? We can work with this, and I can do some little things to it to make it more my style.
Yeah.
So
and this is in 2020, correct?
This was in 2020.
With its own set of like challenges as well. So, all right. So you decide on this house. Tell me about the buying process. Were you able to go through pretty quickly? Were you able to get into the home and move in relatively easily?
It went fairly smoothly. I learned a lot of things the first time round that I changed when I bought my second house. Because again, when I called the company that I ended up using, the lady that picked up the phone that showed me the house, that's who we went with. She was super nice. Like, personally, she was wonderful. But I had to be on her constantly to like be doing the steps that need to be done. And it was my first home buying process, so I'm learning too. And so when I would have, like, for instance, sometimes the seller's realtor was reaching out to me because they couldn't get a hold of her, and they were saying, we need this paper, we need this stuff signed. And so I felt like I wasn't her priority, and I had to call her constantly and say, hey, we need to be doing this, we need to be doing this to move the process along. So it was a lot of, I felt like, hand holding on my part, which was frustrating because it's my first time too.
Sure.
And I'm learning all these things. So there was a struggle there, but we got through it all. We got the house for under asking, I believe. And that's always kind of a dance too, when you're working with your realtor. And again, it being our first time.
Yeah.
My personality is, I don't want to pay full price for anything.
Yeah.
Like, if I don't have to, I'm not going to pay full price. My husband's even worse. Like, he's like, I will lowball as low as, and it's always something ridiculous where I'm like, why waste your time even throwing that number out there? But that's just his personality. So we kind of settled in the middle. And it's hard because I don't know how much information the realtor has on the house. And, we have next to nothing. And I think that possibly the seller's realtor is always they want to make it seem like it's, you better get it in or it's going to go, something along those lines. With this house, what I found out later was, I knew I had been sitting a little bit, but I didn't know why. And, basically the guy had moved out of it, sold it to a bank. It was being sold by a bank and not a person. It had been neglected a little bit. So I think all of those things might have helped us get it for a little under asking, where the bank was just kind of ready to let it go.
Yeah.
But our realtor was like, she did not want us to offer below. And I said, I'm going to start lower. Sure. So I felt like we were pushing her a little bit to say, no, I don't want to, offer full price right away. But they gave it to us for what we wanted. We did write a letter, sometimes they tell you to do that. I have no idea if it had an effect on, I don't even know if there were other offers on the house, but I always do that as a force of habit to say it's not going to hurt to write a letter about.
What was in the letter?
Just, we wrote to which was funny, we wrote to the owner, and then we found out later the bank owned it. But we wrote to the owner just what we liked about the house, talked about our kids, about our family, what we were looking for, why we thought the house matched our needs. Talked about, the pride of ownership we felt like he had because he had just redone the kitchen, which we could tell, and it was nice. Those kinds of things.
Yeah. And the bank was like, thanks.
I know. Maybe the bank cared. Maybe they were like, oh, this is great. Like, we'd like it to go to a family or something like that. So it worked out. We got the house. It was all quick. Again, there was a little bit of me pushing my realtor, but I think it got done in the normal amount of time. And then my husband moved in before we did. And this is, again, where our West Coast naivete comes in. We're like, there are roaches everywhere and rats and all of these things, because the pest control hadn't been done in a certain amount of time. And I have had to adjust to the bugs, let me tell you. Just that it's normal to have a roach in your house, and it, those kind of things. So we had to come in.
It doesn't mean that you're dirty.
Yes, it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong necessarily. It just, you need to have your pest control up to date. So pest control came in. He took care of it. There was a lot of, the kids got used to me screaming a lot every time I'd find one, and I've slowly begun to tolerate them more. Still, my family won't visit me sometimes because they're worried they're going to see roaches. Anyway, so it worked, and we moved in, and it went smoothly.
Yeah. So 2020, you get into the home. You guys are finally settling into Waco. Things are starting to go well, and you decide at some point, I want a new home.
Yes.
So first of all, take me through the process of that decision. But also, I want to know, like, you've talked about learning a lot of lessons that from the first time, and I want to get into those as you start the process of buying the new house. But before we do that, I do want to hear a lot about, now you're going into a selling mindset. So take me through the conversation of, hey, I think I want a new home, and then tell me about that process.
So we had been in the house 2 years, and when we bought that house, because it was a little bit smaller than what we had originally thought, we knew we were gonna just make it to the 2-year mark, where you don't have to worry about capital gains and all of that. And then we were going to get into something bigger. And we had actually built an extension on that house too. So we had like an extra room built onto the back of it while we were there, and we had the foundation fixed. That was another thing we had to learn about.
Yeah.
So we had done quite a bit of work on the house. We'd painted the outside of it, done all sorts of things to update it. So we were like, okay, we've hit our 2 years. We can start looking. And we may have done this like a little bit different than some other people would, because we didn't have to sell that house to get into a new one.
Yeah.
And so we were going to go buy the house we wanted first and then turn around and sell the other house. Yeah. And we were back and forth on whether we wanted to rent the first house, but I personally, I don't have what it takes to be a landlord, I don't think. So I told my husband, I said, no, we're selling it, but we're going to sell it after we buy whatever we feel ready to move into. And that way gave us some leeway. If there was things we wanted to do on the new house, we had somewhere to live while we were doing some of the other things. But so I said, we have time. That's where I think a lot of people that are shopping for houses, they don't necessarily have time. Yeah. And so this is where I felt like I learned some things, and there were some things I wanted out of realtors that I wasn't getting because I was like, I'm not in a rush. And I know that they probably are used to working people that are like, I need a house now. Yeah. And I'm going to like be okay with these check boxes not being checked, like, or, you know, some things falling off my list. But I was like, no, I have all the time in the world. So I want every box checked. I want it to be the right house. So I knew that I thought I wanted like an older home. I wanted something with a more traditional layout. Mm-hmm. I didn't want something that was like really modern where everything's one space. I wanted separate rooms. I needed it to be like 4+ bedrooms at least. Yeah. At least 4 bedrooms. And I wanted it to be 2 stories. That was something my son had requested on the first house that he didn't get. So he was like, I want it, you know, I want to do
a slinky from the top to the bottom. And I can't do that without a second floor.
He was like, we need stairs. We had bought him a bunk bed that had stairs going up to it, and it wasn't enough. So we needed 2 levels. Why don't we just do, like, with the house size we were hoping for, 2 levels would be likely. So there was a couple of things. It was, for me, it was like, I wanted to look a certain way, and I don't want to have to do too much to it. Sure. So we looked. And we were living in Hewitt at the time, and I liked Hewitt. I wasn't in love with the elementary school we were zoned for, so I was looking to move out of that zoning. And I was pretty open-minded, though, because I also was willing to do private school if that meant we were in a school district I didn't really like to be in, or we could be. I loved Woodway. I had loved Woodway the first time round. We just didn't end up buying any of the houses in that area. So we looked at a lot of different houses. Like, I probably looked at 30 houses, and part of it was I just want to look even if I'm not all that interested, because I like to just see what's out there. Yeah. I also like to see how different the pictures are from the house in real life. Yeah. Because as you guys know, pictures are important. Yeah, okay? Yeah. That's actually part of the reason why we bought the first house, was because the pictures were so good. Yeah. And they had done like an aerial above the house, and they did a really good job with the photographs. So, you know, if I saw a house and I loved the pictures, even if I was like, you know, I don't think this is the house, I was like, I just want to go look at it. Yeah. I want to see what it looks like in person. How
does it translate from picture to in person?
And especially some of these older houses that are in Waco, you can't tell what shape the house is in from the pictures. You have to go and see it in person. So I think one of the issues I ran into was, and I shopped with a lot of different realtors. Like, I would go look at one house with one realtor and then go to another one with a different realtor. And, you know, I wanted to find somebody that had this, you know, fit my vibe, and that was okay with the fact that I wanted to look at a lot of houses before I bought anything.
So let's talk about your realtor experience on the second one. Now, the first time you had mentioned it just wasn't ideal. You know, like, you have a reputable company that, you know, you're like, oh, I can put faith into this because I've heard their name maybe, or, you know, I'm sure any realtor is going to be the same. You may be a little naive and thinking like, I don't really have to shop for a realtor because they all do the same thing. You learned a lesson, kind of thinking like, hey, there is something actually to selecting a realtor, somebody that, you know, will meet your needs, and everybody's needs are a little bit different. So tell me about the second time. You mentioned there just a second ago that, you know, you would take a realtor out to this one, a realtor out to that one, kind of shopping a little bit. you also had the luxury of time at this
Mm-hmm.
point. So tell me that process. What stood out to you for some of the realtors that felt right for you?
Yeah. So, and part of what happened with the second time round too was, I'll say there was one house that I really wanted that wasn't technically up for sale yet. They hadn't put a price point on it, but I knew what company was going to get the listing. And so I wanted to, and it was the same company I had used before. And I remember not having a great experience the first time, but this time I was like, well, I want to entertain a few of those realtors because I think they're going to know what's going on with this one house that I'm particularly interested in. But I wanted to also like widen my net as well. So I was using a few from that company, and then I was using several from other companies that people had recommended. One thing I did not know, and I should have learned this the first time around, but I didn't remember having this experience, was some of the realtors from that company that I'd used before, that I was using a few of realtors from again, they had me sign an exclusivity contract.
Mm,
They were really good at not telling me what it was, and this is on me. I mean, I should have read it,
sure.
but so I don't blame them at all, except for that it did put a bad taste in my mouth
Sure.
later when I realized what had happened. So I, they just said, "Oh, I just need you to sign this really quick before we look at this house," and I'm like, "Okay, sounds good," because I thought, I could bounce around from realtor to realtor. I didn't know that it was possible for me to get tied to one.
Okay.
So I was going into a house and the realtor said, "Hey, can you just sign this really quick?" I should have read it, looked at it. That's on me. But it put a bad taste in my mouth later, thinking, they didn't tell me what it was, or that it meant that I had to buy a house with them, or whatever.
Sure.
And to be honest, to this day, I don't know what the exact wording is, but I'll tell you later, like why that ended up being an issue. But anyway, I was still like, even having signed that with one realtor, I was kind of like taking different ones out shopping. And the ones that made the biggest impression on me were some of the ones that were reaching out to me but not being pushy. I really struggle when I feel any pressure or pushiness from anybody, because sometimes I'm a big window shopper, and I'm like, sometimes
Yeah.
I just want a window shop and I don't want any pressure, and
Yeah.
I'll come to you when I'm ready. But like a little bit of check-in here and there was good. And so basically, most of these realtors I took out shopping once, they never contacted me again, which I was kind of fine with. I was like, you know what, I do prefer to reach out to them when I want to go do something. But there was this one realtor, and she was so sweet. She would just check in with me every once in a while, and she would send me a house that I hadn't seen, and I'd be like, oh, I really like that house, and I would go
Yeah.
look at it with her. But I ended up kind of mostly using this realtor who was from that bigger company I had used before. And at the beginning, it was fine. She was very personable. But I could tell after, and again, I'm upfront with, like, maybe I'm not someone that they
Sure.
ideally would like to work with, because it was probably after 6 or 7 houses, I could tell she was getting impatient. And I was like feeling it off of her. But every time I'd ask her about it and be like, hey, like, I know I'm looking at a lot of houses. Like, would you rather I use someone else or whatever?
Sure.
She would say, no, 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 I'm great, I'm good. And I'm like, I'm pretty good at reading people. Like, I feel your frustration every time we're in a house where you don't love that I don't love the house that we went through. And so that was a big thing for me, was I don't like feeling pressured. I didn't like feeling like she was frustrated showing me house after house after house. So we were kind of going through this, and a lot of the houses I wanted to look at and just window shop at were just like in Castle Heights, like some of those older homes, because I don't have a lot of experience with older homes. And so I'm like, I love the way they look, but I'd go through them and I'm like, I don't know if I can take this on. Like, it feels too much. But I want something that gives me this vibe, but that is not as high maintenance as some of these houses. And there were some, I went and looked through 2 or 3 times, just not sure if I wanted to make an offer or not. And I just felt like from her, there was some pressure where she would try to make me feel better about certain things that I had said, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just feel like you're getting impatient and you want me to make an offer, which I didn't love. And she took me through a lot of houses. And then what happened with the house that we did end up buying was, and again, I like to look on Zillow because it tailors itself to me. I would save things that I liked and it would kind of send me things along the same lines. And I never really liked any of the houses they would send to me on the MLS. And I would notice, of course, that a lot of the realtors, when they would send me MLS listings, they'd always prioritize things that were in their branch, like whatever their company was selling. That's what's up front. And for me, I was like, I don't like that. I want to see everything. I don't want to see just what you have for sale, because that's not my haystack. Like, I want something that is my aesthetic, what I'm looking for, not what you want to sell me. And one of the houses I looked at with this realtor, I ended up spending the most time with, she was trying to push me into this one house. And I realized it was because the selling agent was also from her company. And I did like the house. I went and looked through it a couple of times. It was in a little neighborhood that I liked a lot. And we were going to make an offer. And I just wasn't feeling good about it. My husband wasn't feeling good about it. We're like, we like this house, but there's just a lot of downsides. The yard's really small. There's nowhere to put a pool if we wanted to put a pool. It needs some work, but it had the character we liked. Yeah. That was really what I was looking for. It was a house with character, a house that's different. I didn't want something that looked like what everybody else had. It had this cedar shake roof, which seemed cool at the time. And I think too, and again, I don't think it's just me. I think everyone feels this way. I wish realtors would be more transparent with things that could be issues or that could cause problems or that could be a headache down the road. Because, the cedar shake roof, my husband and I do our own research. I'm like, oh, it actually needs replaced. Oh, it's very expensive to replace. Like, those kind of things, like, I want to take into consideration when I buy a house. Yeah. Because I don't want to get into a house, be living in it for several months and be like, oh my gosh, like, I feel like the realtor could have pointed this out and chose not to. Yeah. And now I'm frustrated.
Yeah. And I will say, like, that is a frustrating thing. Sometimes they can't tell you things like that. Okay, see,
and that's good to know too.
But I mean, you have an inspection, you have other things that should inform your decision to buy, but well, tell me more about, as you're going through the realtor process, and kind of feeling out these different things, like, you go to this house, you're close to making an offer, and you say, you know what, it just doesn't feel right, which again, you mentioned this earlier, this has to be a home. This is one of the largest purchases in your life. Your family's going to live here. You're going to spend the majority of your life in this place. It's got to be the right fit, and for the realtors out there that do get frustrated, like, it's a good reminder that this is that biggest purchase, and and though it's frustrating, a family that's doing it right is a family that's thorough, and I think that you guys are thorough, and I think that's where you were kind of going with this. So you decide to back out of this house. I'm sure the realtor was probably a little frustrated.
Yes.
But what made you decide on something else?
Well, so two, like, this was going to be our, like, forever home, right? Yeah. So that's part of why I was really wanting to take my time, because I said, I don't want to move again. I want a house that, as long as we're in Waco, Texas, like, this will be the house we will live in for, as long as we're here. We had gone and asked a bunch of the neighbors. This was something I was glad my husband had done. He was like, we feel weird about this house. He went and knocked on neighbors' doors. I'm not brave enough to do this. He was knocking on neighbors' doors and say, hey, what do you know about this house? And every single one of the neighbors said, oh, the yard floods every time it rains. And it comes up to the door. And then when we went back, we saw this water damage that was on the back door from the rain just getting stuck there. So it had really bad drainage issue. And, I don't know if she knew that or not, and it doesn't really matter, but we were kind of like, oh, that's a deal breaker for us. We're not going to do that. We were already kind of like not sure about some things. So we backed out of it. She was really frustrated. And, but we were just like, no, we're not going to do it. So, and then she kept trying to point us towards houses that were, again, listed by realtors that were in her company. And I didn't like that. It felt icky. So what happened was, with the house that we settled, so there was one realtor that I went out with a couple times. She was super sweet. She got my aesthetic. She understood what I was looking for. Like, even though she'd been to 2 houses with me, I could tell that she got it and she knew what I was looking for, spending as little time with me as she did. So she sends me a house and she says, hey, just checking in. I saw this house. I think you're going to really love it, but you're going to have to act quick because it's going to sell in like a day. And so I looked at it and I was like, yeah, I really like this house. And even more so, my husband was quite in love with it. And so we said, can you set it up? Like, she had found the house. We said, can we come see it with you? And we kind of gave our other realtor a heads up that I had been to most of these houses with. We said, hey, this other realtor I had kind of been working with a little bit, she sent me this house. We'd like to go see it with her because she's the one that sent it. And this realtor, again, that had kind of given me this icky feeling, she said, oh, no, you can't buy with her. You have to buy with me. You sign a contract. And we were like, oh, we didn't realize that was that's what that was, and that we were bound to buy a house with you. So she said, I have to show you this house. You can't see it with the other realtor. So then we had to turn around and say, I am so sorry. Thank you for sending us this listing. Unfortunately, we didn't realize we had signed a contract with this other person. So she has to show it to us. And the realtor who had sent us the listing was totally understanding. She's like, I get it. No worries. Like, don't stress at all. She was super kind about it. So then we had this other realtor show us a house, and we had to go back and then tell the realtor that had sent us the listing, hey, I'm so sorry. We have to see it with this realtor. We didn't realize we had signed a contract with her. Thank you so much for sending it to us. She was very understanding. She was so sweet about it. No worries, totally understand. I hope you love it. So we went to the house that night, and because there were like 10 showings that day, so we knew,
oh my gosh,
we hadn't had this experience with the house before where there was pressure, like real pressure, like we have to put an offer in now if we're interested because there's a bunch of people looking at this house. It was at the top of our budget, and I think that was another part of, again, this is me sensing, like reading things off her. She never said this to me. But I felt like that realtor, one of her frustrations was, too, that I kept trying to look at houses that were below the budget she knew we could spend. And so I think that for her, she was excited to show us houses that were in a certain price range. And I just didn't like any of those houses. And I kind of was like, I know I can spend this much, but I don't want to if it's not the right house. So we ended up looking at this house. It's at the top of our budget. And she was like, okay, like you need to make an offer on it like today if you're interested. And I knew she was right because there was a lot of people there. My husband really liked the house. I was a little more hesitant because I was like, if I'm going to spend this much on a house, I want to not have to touch it. I don't want to have to like even paint the walls. But, coming in, I had to talk with him, and he's the best man. He's so understanding, and even though it does not matter to him what a house looks like, he knows how much it matters to me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, if we're buying this house, like I need to paint all the walls, I need to paint the cabinets, I need to like
it needs to be mine.
It needs to be mine, and the whole color palette has to be different. But as far as the layout, I loved it. The layout was exactly what I was looking for. It was a mix of like traditional while not overly traditional, so it suited my husband as well, where there was some open space but not too much, and there were separate rooms for things. Had 4 bedrooms, had a pool, which initially we were not looking for because I didn't want the stress of the safety aspect. But now I'm glad we have a pool, so that worked out. Had everything. It had this beautiful backyard. It was wonderful. It had the 2 stories. It was great. It was a really wonderful house. And it had a history of selling quick. They said, this house is historically sold in one day the last 2 times it sold. And it was on a street we loved. We had looked at a different house on the same street. And I remember driving up that street and saying, oh my gosh, this road is beautiful. Like the trees, everything about it was in Woodway, a really pretty part of Woodway. And we had looked at the other house on that street, which from the outside loved the house, went into the house, not so great. And that had more to do with the people who were not upkeeping it. So realtors, if someone has multiple cats, make sure they're put away before someone comes into the house. There were like 5 cats in that house, and like baby gates that were pulled out of the walls, and cigarette butts all over. And it was a beautiful house, but it wasn't, it had not been cleaned. It hadn't been cleaned. There were cigarette butts all over the back patio. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. So we knew we loved the street. I was like, okay, well, we're going to offer on it. And this is one of those houses where you just have to offer them. I'm like, I'm not offering over asking, but I'll offer them asking because I know we're going to have to. So we did. And it got accepted, which was exciting. And I was a little surprised.
Did you write a letter on this one?
We did. I write a letter every time. So we wrote a letter. Offer was accepted. Everything's great. Now my realtor's happy. And I can feel the sense of like, okay, we're at the finish line. I found her this house. But again, I just felt like a lot of, we're just going to get through the motions. I didn't feel I didn't feel like she cared about me.
There's no relationship here.
And I felt like she was trying, but it felt really fake to me, where I felt like she was going through the motions. She wanted to put on this persona that she cared about me, but I just kept getting this like, no, I really don't feel like you do. Because we went through the inspection process. I have thoughts about inspectors too. I think they do a wonderful job, and you should definitely shop around for inspectors. But there's a lot of things I'm surprised they don't catch that I have now seen in my house that I feel like an inspection should have caught this, and
Sure.
it didn't. So to me, I was like, the inspection didn't really tell me anything.
Yeah.
But we did the inspection, and there were a few things that I was concerned about. There was some issues with some of the windows having like condensation between the panels and this and that. And me being still a very new homeowner, I don't know how much that's going to cost or how big of a problem it is.
Yeah.
And everything that was a concern to me, she just said, "Oh, it's fine. You won't even need to do anything, or you can just replace one panel of the window. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. You don't have to worry about it." And I was like, "Okay." And so when I then lived in the house for a while, and I'm realizing, no, this whole window has failed, and I need all new windows. And oh my goodness, this is how much windows cost. Like those are things that I'm like, she knew that, but I think she wanted me to not back out. And so there was a couple things like that were frustrating. Still love the house, still happy with the house. But yeah, so the sale went through. I felt like, again, it just was like a rush. I want to get it done. I want the sale done. There were some weird things with the people we bought it from, but I know she wasn't privy to that. But again, I felt like she wasn't on my side always. Like we had bought the house, and we did a bunch of like painting and other things into it where we didn't move into it until a month and a half after we got the keys. So like a month after this is our house, the keys, we're still getting like mail. I can understand, but I was getting Amazon packages for the lady who had lived there before, and there was some weird stuff. There were some things. But they had just moved into an Airbnb close by. And so I took over lots of her packages. I was driving her packages to her house, and I was getting really frustrated with this. And I told my realtor, I said, "You've got to talk to them. Like, I cannot keep driving these packages." And she's like, "It's not that big of a deal. Just like, if you want me to take them, I'll take them." I'm like, "Okay, but these are Amazon packages.
House now. Yeah.
This is my house, and I can understand some mail slipping through, but like you can change your Amazon address. Like I'm getting her Amazon packages, she can change the address." So there was stuff where, my realtor be texting me like, "Hey, did you see this package? Did it come to the house?" I'm like, "That's not my responsibility. Like if a package goes missing, it's not my responsibility." So it just kind of like, there was a lot of things that just kept carrying over that I was not okay with. So going back to, the realtor who found me my house that we couldn't buy it through, I knew I was going to use her to sell my house, the one that we hadn't sold yet. So, and this was hard for me because, I struggle with confrontation like most people do. I didn't know how to tell the realtor that I had bought with that I did not want her to sell my house. Yeah. So I did string her along a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, we're not ready to sell it. Like we're not." Sure. And I just kept telling her we weren't ready. We weren't going to sell it while I was like listing it with this other person because relationships are complicated, and I just was like, I don't know how I would have this conversation with you about like how I just didn't have a good experience, and I don't want to do it again. But eventually, that contact mostly dropped off, and I felt like comfortable being like, okay, I'm gonna let this other realtor sell my house. So she sold my house. I said, "I know I couldn't buy through you, but I'm gonna have you sell my other house."
Well, that's what a gift for her, though. And I think this is a testament to, treating people the right way. And, there's some realtors out there that they have an experience where like, "I would love to sell you this house. You're already with another realtor, but if something in the future, comes up, I would love to do that," or whatever. Or if you have a friend, so this is a great example to be able to say, "Hey, I'm going to come back to you. Your loyalty is being rewarded, in a way. And your kindness, your grace, what a great experience." How did the selling part go for you on the first house? Pretty smooth?
It was good. So this was my first experience selling. So I was like, okay, I don't know how quickly to expect it to go. It was a little bit of we have work going on at the other house. Like I would like to start the process of selling this one, but I wasn't in a super rush, and stuff was still going on over there. But I told her, again, I was like, "You are so gracious with, the other house, and we are so grateful to you for finding that house because our other realtor didn't find that house, you did, and it ended up being the house after we looked at probably about 30. So I was like, I know, so sell our house." She came in, was super simple. And again, it being my first time, I was like, I don't know if I pay to have the pictures done or you pay to have the pictures done. She's like, oh no, I cover the cost of the pictures. And I said, well, are you okay if we use the company that did the listing photos when we bought this house? Because we really liked those photos. Are you okay if we use this person instead of your guy? And she was like, yeah, absolutely, whoever you want. So she was very flexible with me. She knew that I wanted to make it look a certain way to make it attractive. So we had her contact the guy that had done the original listing photos, and they ended up hitting it off. She still uses them. Then we got the photos that we wanted out of it. We didn't have to stage it or anything. We had all my furniture in there, and she felt like it looked really nice, so we didn't have to stage it, which was nice. It was simple. I got it deep cleaned before we took all the photos, and I was a little nervous about the whole showing of it because I had 3 kids at this point and a dog. And, being out of the house for a certain amount of time is hard. But again, I think it is a testament to her and also the market at the time, but we sold it in a day. Wow, so, I had 1 day of showings and that was it. And it was 1 day of 12 showings. They all came back to back. This is another thing I thought was funny. And this is for, realtors as well as our clients. Like, remember that we're looking at the doorbell cam when people are coming through, because how could we not be curious about what people are saying about our house as they leave? So I'm listening to the doorbell cam and I'm hearing everybody's final thoughts as they're leaving the house, and which was interesting. We ended up having 2 offers on the house that first day. I should mention too, I was struggling with where to appraise the house because we had added on to it. And that was one of those things where I was like, I don't know what it's worth anymore. There's more square footage. Sure. All of that. Plus, obviously things appreciate. So I happen to have friends that had an appraisal company. So I had them come out and appraise the house. And when I got the number back, I was like, I think they're just being nice to me because there's no way this house is worth that much. Yeah. So I was like, but I appreciate it because for me, it was a bargaining chip more than anything. I was like, I'm not going to list it for this, but I like to be able to whip it out if I had someone make an offer and I'd be like, well, it's actually worth this, just so you know. So, and my realtor, she was really good with the whole thing because she hadn't necessarily suggested getting it appraised, but I was like, I know I need it appraised, more square footage and everything. And when I showed her the number 2, I could tell that she didn't want to say anything till I said anything because I knew she thought it was too high too. And I remember sitting down, she was like, okay. And I was like, I know the number's too high. I know it is. And she's like, okay, good. I wasn't sure how to tell you. I'm not sure we could get it for this. I'm like, but it helped me realize that I could do something a little higher than what you and I had originally talked about. And she said, that's good. I feel comfortable about it. Whatever, that we both need to be comfortable with it because she's the professional. She knows, what's going to move. And then I have, of course, what I would like. Yeah. So having that appraisal was helpful where I was like, I'm not going to get this much, but I'm going to list it for more than what we had originally discussed. Yeah. So we did. And 2 offers on the house first day. The first one was all cash, but way below asking. And the second one was it was 10 below, but with a financer and everything. And they submitted a letter, and it did matter. That's sweet. At the end of the day, obviously, if someone's offering way below what you'd like, maybe the letter's not going to seal everything, but I think it helps. Absolutely. So they had written a letter telling us, like, why they wanted the house. And their offer was better. Mm-hmm. And so, again, the realtor was really helpful in helping me figure out, okay, what can we do about this? Because the offer's not quite what we would like. It's close, but it's not quite. Can I leverage the other offer? And so we just let them know, like, we do have another offer. If you'd like to come up to asking, you'll get it. And they did. So they came up to asking. Awesome. And they were so sweet. It was funny because they had talked on the doorbell about changing all of the colors of the house, which they still haven't done. So apparently they thought it was fine. Yeah. But they had a really great previous tenant who knew it was great and they loved it. And so anyway, they were super sweet, and we went through the whole process, and we got what we wanted out of the house, which was great. And again, having it done in a day, I was like, yes. 2 days by the time the negotiations were over. So then after that, it's 30 days and you're out. Yeah. So I'm like, oh man, go time. Like, I got to make sure our other house is finished, that we can move into it, all of that. And then came the inspection, which doing it the first time as a seller made me nervous because I'm like,
Sure.
I feel like this house is fine. And if you find anything wrong with it, I don't agree. You know, it's kind of, it was nice to be on the other side of it and be like, well, I've been living in this house for 2 years and everything's fine. And so the inspection came back and there was a couple things that they wanted changed. And initially I was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing anything. But my realtor was like, well, listen, like you do need to be flexible.
Yeah.
Here's some ways we can fit it in so that you don't, the least amount out of your pocket or whatever. She was really helpful in making me feel comfortable, helping me come to terms with the fact that I was going to need to make these changes. And it wasn't that big of a deal at the end of it. It was like we added a couple attic vents and then there was this whole electrical thing they wanted done. But we just decided to, cover some of the closing costs instead, which for me was less stressful. And I think they were happy with it. So negotiated, it was good. And handed the keys over and it was simple. She made it easy, yeah.
All right, Kristen. So we're coming close to the end of the show. And I want to leave our listeners with some really, good takeaways. So I want you to give me 3 good takeaways or 3 good tips for what you might want to look for in a selling agent, and then 3 good tips that maybe you want to look for in a good buying agent.
Okay, so yes, for a buying agent, honestly, the 3 things that I would look for are patience.
Yes.
That was my big thing because you are looking for a needle in a haystack, and you want it to be the right house, and there are a lot of houses out there. So just the patience. Make sure that they're happy and that they're really comfortable with what they're buying. 2, transparency to a point that you can. As a buyer, we don't know what you can and can't tell us. But I think like transparency would be helpful so that they don't get into a house and say, I feel like the realtor knew this and then didn't tell me and now I don't want to use that person again. So whatever transparency you can give. And then the third thing too would be do your best to understand their aesthetic. I think that's what the realtor who ended up finding my house understood, and it didn't take her long. Where if I had a certain look I was going for, and so she ended up finding something that actually not only fit my aesthetic but my husband's as well. It was like a perfect combination. So understand what kind of house, what does it look like? What does the house look like? So you don't waste your time sending them a bunch of houses that they're just gonna say no, not interested. So those are the top 2 things as far as. A seller's realtor, I think good photos. Yeah. That's a big one. The photos have to be pleasing and catch someone's eye. Can't tell you how many listings I've gone through where it's like, whoa, there's clutter or whatever out in the photos, and that makes a big difference. The second one I think would be just help them understand the process, especially if they haven't done it before. Help them navigate it and where with my realtor, she helped me set a price point, but was understanding of, I've had this appraisal done or whatever. Step them through the process and make it smooth. The third thing would be, I think the technology is helpful now where she had an app and people, it would tell me when the showings were and everything, and it made it really simple for me to know, okay, I need to be out of the house at these times. I could approve and or not approve certain showings. She made it really simple for me. She was in good contact with me the whole time. Also, she kept up with me. Yeah. So we'll just say the third one is use the technology to make it simpler and then keep up with them after. She contacts me once a year, every year, and she brings me a little gift and to say thank you for using her on that, just that one little house. And I've recommended her to a lot of people because I feel like she's just kind. She's really patient. She's genuine. She's authentic. Yeah. And she's just very sweet, and I appreciate that she keeps up with me every year. Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. Well, Kristen, I cannot tell you and thank you enough how much I've really enjoyed this conversation. The insight that you've given us is just really worthwhile, and hopefully we can use some of this. Our listeners can kind of go and take this with us. So thank you so much for being on the show.
I'm happy to be here.
And this brings us to today's tip of the week. Every client has different expectations depending on whether they're buying or selling. Sellers want confidence that you can market and negotiate effectively. Buyers want patience, honesty, guidance, and someone who truly listens to their needs. The agents who earn the most referrals aren't necessarily the ones that talk the most. They're the ones who make the clients feel heard, respected, and supported throughout the entire process. Before we end today, I also want to thank our sponsor, which is The Doors of Waco. Step into the story of Waco one door at a time. The Doors of Waco is a beautifully crafted coffee table book featuring stunning photography and the hidden character behind some of Waco's most iconic entrances. Whether displayed in your home, office, Airbnb, or gifted to a client, it's a meaningful way to showcase a love for Waco. It also makes the perfect closing gift for realtors looking to give something local, memorable, and lasting. Open the door of your copy today at doorsofwaco.com. Thanks again, everybody, for being on the show today, and we'll see you on the next one.
And that's today's pour. Thanks for spilling the real tea with us. Don't forget to follow the podcast so you don't miss the next hot pour of real estate talk. And remember, this is just the tea, not legal, real estate, or financial advice.